Title: Nightline Connection. The shrill ring of the phone startled Claire Anderson out of her half-asleep daze. She squinted at the clock on her nightstand, 11:47 p.m., a time reserved for emergencies, bad news, or the occasional telemarketer who couldn't keep track of time zones. She debated ignoring it, but reached for the receiver anyway, her voice groggy as she answered. "Hello?" There was a pause, followed by an uncertain male voice. Is this Marco's Pizzeria?" Claire sat up, blinking. "Does this sound like Marco's?" she asked dryly. "Do you hear sizzling pizzas in the background?" "Oh shoot," the man said, clearly embarrassed. "Sorry, I must have misdialed." "You think?" she replied, unable to resist. He chuckled, the sound warm and unguarded. "Yeah, okay, I deserve that. Sorry for waking you." "Don't worry about it. I wasn't exactly sleeping, just contemplating my existence," she quipped. "Deep thoughts for almost midnight," he said, amused. "So, what's tonight's big existential question?" "Why anyone would call a pizzeria this late at night, for starters." Claire shot back. "Touché," he admitted. "It was a craving for garlic knots. Those things are basically currency." "Clearly, you're an economist by trade," she said, deadpan. "Close," he replied. "I'm an architect, which means I'm usually awake at this hour, sketching buildings no one will build." Claire found herself smiling despite the absurdity of the situation. "Well, Mr. Architect, you've ruined my riveting evening of existential despair. How can I ever repay you?" "Let me make it up to you by not calling back," he offered, his voice tinged with humor. "See that you don't," she said, though her tone was more playful than stern. "Good night, Marco's Not a Pizzeria," he said, and the line clicked off. The following night, Claire's phone rang again at almost the same time. She glanced at the caller ID. Unknown number. "You again?" she said, answering with mock exasperation. "Would you believe me if I said I misdialed a second time?" the same voice said. "Not for a second." He sighed dramatically. "Okay, you got me. I was just wondering if existential crises are a nightly thing for you." Claire laughed. "Only when strangers disrupt my routine with late-night phone calls." "Noted. I'll make sure to call at a more convenient time." "You're assuming there is a convenient time for unsolicited calls," she pointed out. "Fair, but here we are. Maybe it's fate. Or maybe you're just bad at saying goodnight," she countered. Their banter continued, weaving through topics like favorite movies, worst jobs, and childhood dreams. Claire found herself laughing more than she had in weeks, enjoying the wit and spontaneity of this unexpected connection. When she finally hung up, it was well past 1 a.m. She stared at the ceiling, her mind buzzing with thoughts of the nameless architect who could make her laugh so effortlessly. Over the next few weeks, their nightly conversations became a tradition. The stranger, who eventually introduced himself as Ryan Miller, had a knack for calling at just the right moment. He was sharp, funny, and surprisingly insightful, and Claire's nights began to feel incomplete without their chats. For her part, Claire, a freelance writer who often struggled with deadlines and self-doubt, found herself opening up to Ryan in ways she hadn't with anyone else. They shared stories, dreams, and frustrations, but always skirted around the details of their real lives. "Isn't it weird that we've been talking for weeks, and I don't even know what you look like?" Claire asked one night. "Does it matter?" Ryan replied. "I mean, what if I'm a 75-year-old man with a penchant for late-night pizza?" "Then you'd be the most charming 75-year-old I've ever met," she said, grinning. "And what if you're actually a robot, programmed to lure unsuspecting architects into existential conversations?" "Touché," she admitted, "but for the record, I'm not a robot, and I'm only 73. They laughed, the kind of laughter that felt like a shared secret. As the weeks turned into months, their bond deepened, but the more they connected, the more the question of meeting loomed between them. "So, what if we met and you decided I'm just average?" Claire asked one night, voicing her fear. "Impossible," Ryan said without hesitation. But what if you met me and realized I'm not as witty in person? Also impossible, she replied, her heart skipping a beat. Eventually, they agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. Neither could deny their curiosity, her nerves jangling. She had replayed their conversations 100 times in her mind, wondering if the real Ryan could ever live up to the voice on the other end of the line. When the door opened and a tall man with disheveled dark hair and a crooked smile walked in, her heart did a little flip. "Claire?" he asked, his voice instantly familiar. She smiled, feeling a rush of relief and excitement. "Ryan." They sat down, their conversation as effortless in person as it had been over the phone. But beneath the surface, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that reality might complicate what had been so simple. As the weeks went by, their relationship deepened, but so did the challenges. Claire's freelance career demanded long hours, while Ryan's architectural firm kept him tied to tight deadlines and frequent travel. Their nightly calls became less frequent, replaced by texts and hurried conversations. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Claire's phone rang. She answered, expecting Ryan, but it was her editor demanding a revision on her latest piece. By the time she called Ryan back, it was late, and he didn't pick up. Frustration and doubt began to creep in. Had they been foolish to think their connection could survive the realities of their busy lives? It wasn't until a surprise weekend getaway planned by Ryan that Claire realized how much he'd been paying attention. He took her to a quiet cabin near the mountains, a place she'd once mentioned as her dream escape. "You remembered?" she asked, touched. "Of course," he said, his gaze steady. "I've been building this for us, brick by brick, moment by moment." Their time together in the mountains reminded Claire of what had drawn them to each other in the first place. It wasn't just the humor or the late-night banter. It was the way they saw each other, flaws, quirks, and all, and still chose to stay. In the end, their story wasn't about a wrong number or even fate. It was about two people daring to connect in a world that often pulls us apart. And as they built their future together, one late-night conversation at a time, Claire knew she'd finally found the answer to her existential question. Sometimes the best connections are the ones you never see coming. I hope you liked the story. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to get notification of next romantic story I am going to share.